Personal. I nodded again, this time slower. It is. He leaned forward, tapping the folder. You want justice more than anything? Then it's time to make noise. And in that quiet little coffee shop, surrounded by the hiss of espresso machines and the murmur of strangers, I felt the first real flicker of power return to my chest. Nathan had declared war. He just didn't know I was about to fight back with fire. The invitation came in the form of a group text from Nathan. Thanksgiving dinner, 3:00 p.m. Lake House. Let's keep things civil. Family is still family. I almost laughed, but instead I replied, wouldn't miss it. Simon and I had planned for this. Go in smiling, he told me. Act broken. Play the part. Let him get cocky. I did just that. I arrived with a pie I didn't bake. And a smile I didn't feel. The house was warm with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles. Laughter trickled from the kitchen where Mom stirred gravy. Like nothing had happened. Cousins chatted in the living room. No one looked me in the eye. Perfect. I greeted Nathan like a sister, desperate for reconciliation. I hugged him, told him I didn't want any more conflict, that Sophie was doing better, and I just wanted peace. He bought it. Glad to hear it, he said, clapping my back. Let's all move forward. Yeah. I nodded, eyes wet. He never saw the tiny camera hidden inside the ornamental snowflake I hung on the bookshelf beside Dad's old war medals. He never noticed the audio recorder stitched behind the lining of my purse, placed perfectly in the crook of the couch we all used after dinner. We sat, plates full of sweet potatoes and quiet tension. Mom sat beside Nathan. I took the seat across next to an empty chair that used to belong to Dad. I let them speak freely. That night, after the dishes were cleared and wine poured, the room got looser. Voices rose. Nathan slouched deeper into his chair, one arm thrown over the back. She thinks we're good now, he chuckled, swirling his glass. Said she doesn't want to fight anymore. Mom smiled faintly. She always wears herself out eventually. Nathan nodded. She's easy to manipulate. Always was. Cry a little. Throw in something about Sophie. Boom. She folds. My jaw clenched. And if she doesn't, a cousin asked. Nathan shrugged. She doesn't have the resources. Besides, I've got Mom backing me. No court will touch it if the matriarch sides with me. Mom didn't object. She just sipped her wine. And that was the moment I knew. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. Calculated, coordinated, cold. Hours later, back in Simon's office, we replayed the audio together. He paused. At that exact quote. I've got Mom backing me. He looked at me. That's it. The linchpin. He opened a thick folder already labeled Marshall versus Marshall. Civil fraud and estate tampering. We now have motive, confession, and collusion. He said, the court won't just take this seriously, they'll salivate. He handed me a copy of the preliminary complaint already drafted. Next step? I asked. We file, we freeze, and we strike. I leaned back in my chair, breath shallow, but steady. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a storm waiting at the edge of their perfect little sky. The invitations went out quietly, handwritten notes, not texts or emails. I wanted them to feel intimate, like I was reaching across the chasm they'd all helped dig. Sunday at 5 p.m., Mom's house. Let's put the past to rest. I'm done fighting. Simon raised an eyebrow when I showed him the note. You sure you want to make it sound like surrender? That's what they want, I said. So, I'll let them think I'm giving it to them, he nodded. Then, let them. By the time I arrived, the house was buzzing. Candles lit, appetizers out, wine glasses already half full, the kind of setup my mother used for baby showers and anniversaries. Now apparently for formal betrayals. I stepped through the door in soft beige, hair tied back, no makeup. Everything about me said humbled, tired, ready to be small again. Rachel, Mom said, kissing my cheek like we hadn't been on opposite sides of a legal war. You look well. Thanks, I replied. Thanks for letting us use the house. Nathan greeted me with that polished politician's grin. Nice to see you. Finally coming to your senses. Let's not ruin the mood, I said sweetly, and he laughed, genuinely amused. The living room had been arranged in a semicircle, chairs pulled in from the dining room and porch. The whole family showed, Patricia, Robert, cousins, even Emily, who stood awkwardly by the punch bowl, avoiding my eyes. I waited until everyone had a drink in hand, a plate on their lap, until the atmosphere had just the right amount of comfort and distraction. Then I stood. Thank you all for coming, I began, voice soft. I know this hasn't been easy. I've been emotional, erratic, and I know how that made things harder. People shifted in their seats, visibly relaxing. I've spent a lot of time thinking, I continued, and I realized none of this fighting has brought peace. Not to me, not to Sophie, and definitely not to this family. Murmurs of agreement. So, I said, I'm done. I'm walking away. Someone clapped. I think it was Patricia. I won't be pursuing legal action. I won't be contesting the will. I won't be dragging any more skeletons into court. Nathan beamed. That's the Rachel we remember. Laughter rippled. Wine refilled. My mother visibly exhaled. I waited a bit longer. Then I pulled out the laptop. I do want to share something though, I said, tone still light. One last story for closure. The room quieted. My fingers clicked the keyboard and the screen glowed to life. Audio began to play. Nathan's voice crystal clear. She thinks we're good now. Said she doesn't want to fight anymore. She's easy to manipulate. Always was. Cry a little. Throw in something about Sophie. Boom. She folds. Chairs creaked. Forks paused midair. She doesn't have the resources. Besides, I've got Mom backing me. No court will touch it if the matriarch sides with me. Silence. I looked around. My eyes found my mother's first. She was pale, frozen. Nathan, I said, still calm. You were saying? His face flushed. That's taken out of context. I turned the laptop toward the crowd. Here's the rest of the context. The video began. The small camera I'd hidden captured everything. The smirk, the self-satisfaction, the casual collusion. Gasps broke the silence. A cousin cursed under his breath. Then came Simon's voice piped in from the speaker recorded earlier just in case. Based on the evidence gathered, including metadata from financial records, forged documents, and audio confession, we are submitting a formal complaint to the state court. The charges include estate fraud, financial impersonation, and conspiracy to defraud. I turned off the laptop. Everyone stared at Nathan. He stood flustered. You think some recordings prove anything? You think? Police sirens cut him off. 2. Officers stepped through the front door, calm, professional. Nathan Marshall, one asked. What is this? He snapped. You're under arrest for fraud, theft, and identity tampering. You have the right to remain silent. The words drowned in the gasps, the chaos, the sound of his cuffs clicking shut. My mother sat still, hands clasped, eyes wide. Emily started crying. I stood in the center of the storm, not smiling, not gloating, just steady. Consider this my closing statement, I said. I didn't come to destroy anything. I came to reclaim what was mine. And for the first time since my father's death, the room felt honest, even if it was burning. I stood in the center of the living room, letting the silence stretch. Nathan was still shouting as the officers tightened the cuffs around his wrists, but no one was listening anymore. Not really. Their eyes were on me. Before they take him, I said calmly, I want everyone here to understand exactly what happened. You didn't just vote me out. You voted for a lie. I stepped back to the laptop and opened a folder labeled Evidence Final. Click. The first document appeared on the screen, a screenshot of my bank account history. A full list of unauthorized transfers timestamped, all traced back to a single IP address, my mother's home. This is when the money started disappearing, I said. Each transfer approved using backup credentials. Credentials that were set up using my medical history. Click. The second file was a copy of the original will, the one I'd found in Dad's hidden drawer, his handwriting, his margin notes, my name. Next to it, the version Nathan had presented at the funeral. My name erased. Signature forged. This, I said, was his work. He didn't just take money. He rewrote my place in this family, and you all let him. Click. Finally, I played the camera footage. Nathan sitting with a glass of bourbon laughing. She's easy to control. She always was. This house, this legacy, it was never hers. It's mine now. No one moved. No one breathed. Then came the twist. Mom, I said softly. You heard all this. You knew, didn't you? She looked up, and for a moment I saw the flicker of the woman who raised me, but it was gone just as fast. I knew, she said. Voice barely audible. Murmurs rippled through the room. I knew, she repeated. Louder now. I agreed. Not because I wanted to hurt you, Rachel, but because I was tired. I was tired of the tension, the battles, the grief. Her voice broke. I just wanted peace. I stared at her. You helped him erase me. I whispered. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't think it would go this far. But you let it, I said. You signed the papers. You nodded while he destroyed everything Dad left behind. She covered her mouth with one trembling hand. I thought if I kept quiet, things would calm down. Nathan tried to speak, but the officer pulled him back. You can explain to the judge, he said flatly. And then they let him out. The door shut behind them like a final note. The room was still, dead quiet. Emily wept openly now. Robert was pale. Patricia clutched her wine glass like it was the only stable thing left. I turned to the rest of them. He's not the only one who lied. But at least now you can't pretend not to see it. My mother sobbed into her hands. No one moved to comfort her. Maybe they didn't know how. Maybe they finally saw what I'd been screaming in silence for years. That being family doesn't excuse betrayal. That silence is a form of violence. That peace built on erasure isn't peace at all. I closed the laptop and walked out without saying another word. Outside, the sky was dark. The porch light flickered like it always did. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward it. The lake house was empty when I returned. And for once, that emptiness didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like exhale. No voices, no footsteps creaking down the hall, no clinking glasses or muffled conspiracies, just silence and peace. I stood in the foyer for a long time, letting the weight of the place settle around me. The faint scent of cedar lingered. Dad's touch, stubborn even. After all the betrayal that had tried to erase it. The walls were still lined with old photographs. I paused at one of them. Me, Nathan, and Dad on the porch swing. Nathan was 5, clutching a toy truck. I was 10, legs too long for the seat. Dad had his arms around both of us. Back when love wasn't questioned. I didn't take the photo down. Not yet. There were things to do first. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm of reconstruction. Simon walked me through every financial reversal. The court order froze Nathan's accounts and routed assets through a temporary conservator. Me, I signed paperwork. While my daughter lay in ICU breathing through machines, my brother drained $850,000 from my accounts. I thought it was a mistake until he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't belong here." Anyway, my own blood, my own family. And just like that, I realized I wasn't one of them. I was disposable. But while they laughed and toasted behind closed doors, I stayed silent for a while. Because revenge makes noise. Justice, it arrives in silence. And when it did, every smug face at that dinner table went pale. They forgot who I was, but I didn't. The sterile sting of hospital air clung to everything, my skin, my clothes, my breath. It was 3:17 a.m. and I hadn't moved from the ICU waiting room in over 8 hours. The plastic chair beneath me had molded to my exhaustion. Every beep from behind The closed double doors made my heart lurch as if Sophie's tiny pulse was tethered to mine. She was only 7. Just 7. One moment she was giggling in the back seat of my car, babbling about her school art project, and the next crushed metal, screaming tires, and silence. A drunk driver ran a red light. The doctors said her injuries were severe, but not irreversible. I clung to that phrase like it was scripture. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I hadn't eaten anything that wasn't from a vending machine. I hadn't changed clothes. But none of that mattered. Not when my daughter was hooked up to more wires than I could count. Not when every breath she took was orchestrated by machines. I stared at the linoleum floor, as if it might reveal answers. Some divine Morse code written in cracks and scuff marks. But the only messages I received were the echoing voices in my head. You should have driven slower. You should have seen the other car. You should have protected her. A nurse passed by, her shoes whispering against the tile. She offered a kind smile. I tried to return it, but my lips refused. 2. Some wounds aren't meant to be stitched. They just need to stop bleeding, and mine finally had. Sophie's release from the hospital came with no fanfare, no balloons, just a signed discharge paper and a slow, careful walk to the car with her small hand wrapped tightly around mine. She was thinner than before, quieter, but her eyes were still curious, and her grip was still strong. Where are we going? She asked as I buckled her into the back seat. Home, I said simply. She furrowed her brows. Not the apartment. I smiled. No, baby. The real one. The drive to the lake house felt different this time. No dread, no hollow anticipation, just the rhythm of tires on asphalt and the occasional question. From the back seat. Did you live here when you were little? Did Grandpa build it all by himself? Can I see your room? I answered everyone. When we pulled into the gravel drive, Sophie leaned against the window, eyes wide. It's huge, she whispered. I carried her up the steps, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. Inside, the air was crisp, fresh from the windows I'd left open that morning. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors like a welcome mat. I sat her down gently. Want the tour? She nodded. I showed her the kitchen first. Pointed to the counter where I used to sneak cookies, and the drawer where Dad hid old receipts and loose screws. In the dining room, I showed her the mark etched into the corner of the table where I'd carved my initials as a child. She gasped like I'd confessed to a crime. You got in trouble for that? She asked. Oh, definitely. We laughed. And it felt like breathing again. I brought her upstairs to my old bedroom. Now hers. The walls had been repainted a soft blue. The bookshelf was already filled with her favorite stories. On the bed sat the same teddy bear she'd had since she was a toddler, returned to her from the hospital bag I'd kept at my side for weeks. She hugged it like it had never left. Downstairs again, we collapsed onto the living room couch. Dad's old one, still as lumpy and beloved as ever. Sophie curled beside me, legs tucked beneath her. I like it here, she said softly. Me too, I replied. She looked up at me. Are we going to stay? I paused, brushing hair from her face. As long as we want to. She smiled, then rested her head against my shoulder. I'm glad you brought me here. So was I. Later that evening, when she had fallen asleep in her new bed, I returned to the study. I opened the desk drawer slowly. Inside were 2 things, the forged will and my mother's letter. The former felt heavy in my hands, ink and lies woven together like armor Nathan thought would last forever. The latter felt lighter now, like something already fading. I walked out to the fire pit behind the house. The stars were out, blinking above the lake's black glass. I struck a match. First the will. Page by page I fed it to the flames. Watched it curl and blacken. Every false word turning to ash. Then my mother's letter. I hesitated, not because I doubted her sincerity, but because I finally understood. Forgiveness doesn't always require a witness. I whispered. I don't need to hold on to what wasn't real. And I let the letter go. The fire crackled soft and final. When I turned to go back inside, I didn't look back. That night, I slept without waking. Once. And when morning came, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like ours. It started with a blank page. For weeks, I'd avoided it, opened a new document, stared at the blinking cursor, then closed the laptop again. I told myself I was too tired, too busy, too focused on rebuilding. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid, not of the words, but of what they would demand of me. Writing meant remembering, and remembering meant reliving everything. Sophie's pale face in the ICU, the silence at my mother's door, the bowl of votes declaring me exiled. But eventually, silence grew heavier than truth. So I began. The first line was raw. My name is Rachel Marshall, and this is the story of how my family tried to erase me. From there, the words poured out like floodwater breaking through a dam. I wrote about the money, the lies, the fake will, the family. Meetings where everyone smiled and nodded while betrayal brewed behind their teeth. I wrote about my father. His quiet strength, his garden room, his war medals no one touched. I wrote about Sophie and the blue bear she clutched. Through every blood draw, every surgery. I wrote about the silence of being betrayed by the people who raised you, and the louder silence that follows when no one comes to your defense. I didn't use aliases. I didn't hide. I posted it all on a blog called Unwritten Wills. The name came to me in the middle of the night because that's what my father left behind. Not just a forged signature, but the unspoken wish that I would survive without their approval. The blog sat quietly for a week. Then, one morning, it exploded. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments, and emails. So many emails. Your story is mine. My brother did the same to me. I thought I was crazy for feeling abandoned by my family. Thank you for making me feel sane again. Some were long with detailed descriptions of legal battles, stolen inheritances, estranged mothers. Others were short, just a sentence or two, like gasps typed between sobs. But one message stayed with me more than any other. I was the mother who stayed silent. I read your words and saw my daughter's face. I've been too ashamed to reach out. Maybe now I still have time. I cried when I read that one, not because it was about my mother, but because someone out there still had a chance to choose differently. I started responding to every email. I spent nights sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, Sophie drawing beside me while I wrote replies, filled with empathy, encouragement, and sometimes just "I believe you." That alone was often enough. The blog grew into something more. I added resources, links to legal aid groups, templates for filing estate disputes, guides for digital security. Simon even agreed to contribute anonymous tips from a professional perspective. We called it the Justice Toolkit, and people used it. One woman won back her grandmother's land after proving her brother forged documents while their mother was hospitalized. Another man discovered his sister had stolen his Social Security checks for years and finally had the courage to press charges. My inbox became a haven for the misfit survivors of family warfare. And every message reminded me I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. I just hadn't known how many others were walking through fire with bare feet, thinking they were the only ones burning. Sophie would sometimes peek over my shoulder and ask, "Is that another story?" I'd nod. "Another person. Like us." She'd smile and go back to coloring. And just like that, the bloodline I'd been born into felt less important because I was building a new one with strangers, with fighters, with truth-tellers, with people who knew that family isn't just who shares your name. It's who stands beside you when everything else falls apart. It was a Sunday morning when Sophie asked the question. We were sitting on the back steps of the lake house, the same steps my dad used to drink his coffee on while the sun rose behind the trees. She had a blanket wrapped around her legs and a mug of warm milk cooped in her small hands. I was beside her, cross-legged, my fingers stained with garden soil from the hydrangeas we'd just planted. She looked up at me, brow furrowed the way she always did when something serious built inside her. "Mom," she asked, "do we still have a family?" I froze. Not because I didn't know how to answer, but because I'd been waiting for the question, and yet I still wasn't ready. She didn't ask it with sadness. Not exactly. It was more like a child trying to categorize the world. Socks go in drawers, shoes by the door, and family. Well, where does family go when it's broken? I sat down my coffee, pulled her closer. "Yes," I said. She blinked, surprised. "We do," I added. "We're it." She smiled, slow and genuine, like the answer had been hiding in plain sight. Later that day, I took her to the front of the house. The grass had grown tall along the gravel path, but the new paint on the porch railings gleamed in the sun. Sophie skipped along the edge, arms outstretched like an airplane. "What are we doing?" she asked as I rummaged through the back of my car. I pulled out a wooden plaque, freshly carved, the letters bold and dark. "Sophie House." Her eyes lit up. "You named the house after me?" I nodded. "It's ours now, and I wanted it to have a name that means something." She traced the letters with her finger. "Like a castle." I smiled. "Exactly like a castle." We hung the sign together. I let her hold the screwdriver while I guided her hand, and she giggled every time the drill roared too loudly. When it was done, we stepped back and admired it. "Will it always say that?" she asked. "As long as we want it to," I said. She stood in silence for a long time, her hand still on mine. The wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves like whispers. She turned to me. "I want to live here forever." "You can," I whispered. We stood like that for a while, the lake glinting behind us, the air clean and clear. The house looked different with her name on it, brighter, like it had taken a breath after holding one in for too many years. That night, after she was asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The lights were low, the fire crackling in the hearth. I held a notebook in my lap, the one I'd started. The blog with. On the first page, I wrote something new. Family is not just who you're born to. It's who you choose to build with, who you bleed with, cry with, rise with. Sophie and I, we are the family I used to beg for, and we are enough. I tore the page out and pinned it to the corkboard above the fireplace, right next to one of Sophie's drawings. A stick figure version of us holding hands in front of a big square house with a sign on it that said Sophie House spelled wrong, perfectly right. In the months that followed, life unfolded not in dramatic gestures, but in small, gentle ones. Mornings making pancakes, afternoons reading on the porch swing. Sophie learning to ride her bike along the same gravel path where Dad once taught me. The house filled with new sounds. Music, laughter, the creak of wood settling into warmth instead of tension. The old memories didn't vanish. They lived in the corners and shadows. But they no longer haunted. They simply coexisted, like echoes from a different life. Sometimes I would stand at the end of the driveway and look at the sign. Sophie House. A simple piece of wood that once meant ownership, now transformed into a declaration. A declaration that we were still here, still standing, still whole. One night, weeks later, Sophie crawled into bed with me after a nightmare. She snuggled close and whispered, "Mom, I dreamed we were back at the hospital, but this time, you weren't there." I wrapped my arms around her. "I'll always be there," I said. "Even if you don't see me, even if everything else disappears." She sighed and curled deeper into me. "Promise. Promise." And that was the thing about promises. The real ones didn't need witnesses or signatures. They just needed to be kept. And in this house with her name on it, every promise I made would echo forever. Because the bloodline they tried to erase, we rewrote it word by word, room by room, brick by brick. At some point, I pulled out my phone, maybe out of habit, maybe to feel tethered to the world outside this antiseptic purgatory. The screen lit up and I tapped into my banking app. I wasn't thinking about money, not really. I just needed to remind myself that at least one thing was stable. And then everything shattered. My checking account, $0 savings, 0 hours business. Account 0. I blinked. Refresh the screen. Thought. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe sleep deprivation had finally broken something inside me. I opened another banking app. My investment portfolio. Also empty, frozen. No activity allowed. Panic. Started like a whisper and rose like a siren. No, no, no. I dialed the bank, fingers trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone. A calm, detached voice answered. She verified my identity, asked me for security questions I could barely remember answering. Yes, Miss Marshall, she said. Smoothly. I see the transactions. The withdrawals and transfers happened overnight between 11:42 p.m. and 3:03 a.m. My breath caught. I didn't authorize anything. I've been here in the hospital. You can check security footage. The transactions were made from a known device linked to your account, she replied. My phone's been in my pocket this whole time, I snapped. How is that possible? There was a pause. Sometimes individuals close to the account holder have access. I froze. The only people with access to anything of mine were blood, my brother, my mother. And they wouldn't, would they? I need to freeze everything. Now, I said, we've already initiated the freeze due to abnormal activity, she said. I hung up, hands numb, the rooms spun. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, and pressed my forehead into my palms. Behind me, the hallway light flickered. Somewhere nearby, a baby cried. I was supposed to be here for my daughter. This was supposed to be about Sophie. And now I was broke, blindsided, betrayed. By who? I already knew the answer. Somewhere deep in the marrow of my bones, I knew. I stood slowly. My legs felt like water, but rage solidified my spine. Whoever did this picked the wrong moment, because I wasn't just a grieving mother now. I was a woman who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I called the fraud department from a bench outside the hospital cafeteria, clutching a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. My hands were too shaky to hold it steady, my stomach too twisted to accept anything. The voice on the other end was different this time. Male professional. We traced the login activity on your account, he explained. The unauthorized transactions were executed remotely using credentialed access from a recognized IP address. Where? I asked, my voice a rasp. He hesitated. The origin of activity tracks back to a residential address, your family home in Beaverton. That IP has been used in previous verified logins tied to your brother, Nathan Marshall. I closed my eyes. That was all I needed. Nathan. I didn't ask how he got in. I didn't need to. Growing up, we were inseparable. Or so I thought. After our father died, Nathan had gradually taken over managing the family finances, especially the lake house and trust accounts. I'd trusted him. I'd let him help with some of my tax setups when Sophie was born. I'd even once emailed him a copy of my digital signature. He had everything he needed, and apparently he used it. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. Tried again. Voicemail. By the third try, I was shaking. I left a message, calm but cold. I know what you did, Nathan. We're going to talk today. I shoved my phone in my pocket and stared out over the hospital side lot, watching as cars came and went, lives moving forward while mine stood still. By noon, Sophie's vitals had stabilized. A little. It was the only thing that kept me from falling apart. But I couldn't stay at the hospital. Not with that kind of betrayal hanging in the air. I needed answers, and I needed them. From my own blood. I drove the hour-long route to my mother's house in silence. The roads blurred past me, my mind replaying every memory I had of Nathan. Birthday parties, family camping trips. The night he cried when Dad died, and I held him like he was still 10 years old. He was my baby brother, and he stole everything. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed 2 extra cars parked outside. Nathan's black truck and my mother's silver sedan. The sight of them side by side made my heart pound harder. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. The curtain in The front room shifted slightly. Someone was there. I rang the doorbell, waited. Finally, the door creaked open. My mother stood there wearing the same floral cardigan she'd worn since I was a kid. Her face was expressionless. "Rachel," she said, like it hurt her to even acknowledge me. "I need to talk to Nathan," I said. "He's not available," she replied. "Don't do this," I said quietly. "He stole from me over $800,000. She didn't blink. "I don't know anything about that. That's impossible," I snapped. "It was your Wi-Fi, your house. He used your connection to access everything." She looked away. Maybe he thought he had a right. My throat tightened. "What?" "You've been gone for years," she said. "Only come around when something's wrong. Nathan's been here helping, holding this family together." I stepped back like her words had slapped me. "So that's it. I deserve this. You're siding with him." She crossed her arms. "I'm not taking sides. I'm staying out of it." The door began to close. I placed my palm on the frame. "Please, Mom." Her eyes flicked to mine. No warmth, no grief, just resignation. "You should go back to the hospital," she said. "Your daughter needs you." And then she shut the door. Just like that. I stood there for a full minute, frozen on the porch of the house where I'd once decorated every window for Christmas. Where my father taught me how to ride a bike in the driveway, where we buried our family dog under the oak tree. Now, it wasn't home. It was enemy territory. And I wasn't their daughter anymore. The lake house was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't come from absence, but from people deliberately trying not to be heard. It used to be beautiful here. Dad built it himself, piece by piece, over 2 summers when we were kids. Back then it smelled like cedar wood and pancakes. Now it smelled like lemon polish and old betrayal. I pushed the door open without knocking. Nathan was already inside, sitting on the leather couch in the living room. Like he owned the place. His posture relaxed, a beer in one hand, phone in the other. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Wow," he said flatly. "No phone call." "No. Can I come over?" Just storming in now. "You didn't answer the phone," I said. 3 times, he smirked. "Didn't seem urgent." I stepped closer, my voice tight. "You emptied my accounts." He didn't blink. "You always were bad with money." My hands curled into fists. $850,000, Nathan. That was everything. Every cent I saved for Sophie's medical care. You didn't just take my money. You gambled with her life. He took a sip from his bottle. "That money wasn't yours." My mouth fell open. "What?" He leaned back, spreading his arms like a preacher in a sermon. "You think just because you worked hard for it, it belonged to you? Rachel, you ran off. You left the family. You stopped showing up. I stayed. I cleaned up the mess. After Dad died, I took care of Mom. I've been here holding this house, this family together. You think that entitles you to steal from me?" "I think it entitles me to what was never yours to begin with," he said evenly. "You were always the outsider. Even Dad knew that." The words struck deeper than I expected. I blinked, trying to keep my composure. "Don't bring Dad into this." Nathan chuckled bitterly. "Oh, please. You know, he only added you into the will to avoid another one of your meltdowns. He pied you." My voice trembled. "That's not true, isn't it?" he asked. "You were his little project, the runaway, the disappointment, who never made it work. Now you're back, crying because the world isn't fair. Grow up." I stood still for a long moment. I could feel the beat of my own heart in my ears. Then I saw her. Mom was sitting at the edge of the hallway, just outside the kitchen, barely visible in the shadows. She wasn't hidden, just still, silent. Her arms folded, her eyes fixed on nothing. She'd been listening the entire time. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "Tell him this isn't okay. Tell him he can't do this." She didn't move. "Mom." Still nothing. Nathan shrugged. "She's not going to save you, Rachel." I took a step toward her. "You heard what he said. He stole from me. Lied about Dad. Is this really who you are now? Someone who lets your daughter be erased. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not about erasing anyone. It's about moving on. What does that mean? It means you should focus on your daughter. She needs you. We can't keep holding on to old wounds. I laughed, a broken, hollow sound. Old wounds? He just gutted my life, Mom. She looked away. Nathan stood. If you're done throwing your little tantrum, you can see yourself out. I stared at both of them, my mouth open, heart pounding. I didn't recognize them. Not anymore. I hope someday you both look back and realize what you became, I said quietly. Nathan smiled. We became survivors. You became irrelevant. I turned, walked out, and shut the door behind me. It clicked louder than I expected, like punctuation on the final sentence of a chapter one hadn't meant to finish. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scraped across the porch in frantic little spirals. I stood on the steps of the house my father built, where I'd once been loved. And I knew then, without question, blood didn't matter anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. Not after what I'd seen in their eyes. Not after hearing my own mother defend silence like it was a virtue. I sat in my old car for nearly an hour. Outside the lake house, staring at the porch light. It flickered like it always had since we were kids. Dad used to say it was the house's heartbeat. Now it just looked like a glitch in something that used to be alive. I knew I shouldn't go back inside. But something pulled me toward the one room that hadn't changed since the funeral. The library. Dad's library. It was the only space in the house Nathan hadn't remodeled, probably out of guilt or maybe superstition. No one touched it. No one dared to move the old globe in the corner or rearrange the dusty bookshelves that lined the walls. I still had the old key. I used it quietly, careful not to wake anyone. The hinges creaked as I opened the door. The scent hit me instantly. Old paper, leather, and the faint trace of cedar Dad always insisted on using for polish. The room was just as he left it. Armchair with a worn blanket over the back, reading glasses folded neatly on the desk. I stepped inside like I was walking into a cathedral. The desk was locked, but I knew the trick. Third drawer from the left had a false bottom. I reached under it, popped the latch, and pulled. Inside was a manila envelope, marked in Dad's handwriting. My name, Rachel. My heart stopped, hands trembling. I opened it. Inside were legal documents, drafts of the will. But not just drafts. Handwritten notes, underlined phrases, and one copy that was signed dated 6 months before his death. In that version, I was listed as a co-owner of the lake house. My name was clearly written next to Nathan's. A trust fund had been designated for Sophie's education. Even a note scribbled in the margin. Make sure Rachel gets the garden room. She always loved the light. I felt tears pricking my eyes. This was real. This was Dad. But then I thought of the will Nathan presented after the funeral. The one where I wasn't even mentioned. I took out my phone and searched through old files. I still had the scanned copy on email. When I pulled it up and compared them side by side, the contrast was immediate. In the official version, the co-ownership was gone. Sophie's trust fund erased. My name replaced by Nathan Marshall and Elaine Marshall. My mother. They'd cut me out together. I stared at the paper in my hands. The signature looked the same, but the strokes felt too perfect, too smooth. My gut twisted. Something wasn't right. I looked around the room and saw the printer in the corner. It was dusty, but the power light was still faintly blinking. On impulse, I opened the paper tray. Just standard white sheets. Then I opened the top feeder tray, the one used for scanning and copying. That's where I found it. A crumpled page, faint ink. Still visible, the last will and testament of Charles J. Marshall. And below it, a signature, or rather a practice signature. There were several attempts on the page, all in different shades of ink, like someone had been trying to match Dad's hand. I covered my mouth. Someone had forged it. Someone had taken Dad's actual intentions, his love, his balance, and buried them under lies printed in this very room. The will I found in the desk had a notary stamp. The one Nathan used at the reading, notarized elsewhere at a date that now looked suspicious. My pulse roared in my ears. They'd gone so far as to rehearse his death on paper. I gathered everything, the real will, the notes, and the forged copy. My hands moved on. Instinct, stuffing them into my bag. I stood in the dark in my father's sacred space, surrounded by the ghosts of what should have been. This house was supposed to be my refuge, but it had become a crime scene, and now I was the only witness. I didn't get invited to the family meeting. I found out from a group text accidentally forwarded to me by one of my cousins. Sunday lunch at the lake house. Quick vote, then food. Bring pie. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. By the time I arrived, the dining room was already full. 15 chairs surrounded the long oak table my father once sanded by hand. Now it looked like a boardroom, and I was the hostile witness. Nathan stood at the head, arms folded. His button-down sleeves rolled up like he'd been working. He wasn't even surprised to see me. "Rachel," he said. Voice smooth. "Didn't think you'd show." "I never left," I replied. "This is still my house, too." The room fell into an uneasy silence. My Aunt Patricia cleared her throat. My Uncle Robert stared at the ceiling. No one met my eyes. "I figured you'd want closure." Nathan continued. "You've been confused, emotional, given everything with Sophie." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare use my daughter." He held up his hands, apologetic. "Fine, then let's talk about the facts. Rachel has decided verbally, mind you, that she's stepping away from any family property claims. She's overwhelmed." "That's understandable." "That's a lie," I said sharply. "Really?" Nathan asked, playing shocked. "Because you told Mom last month that you didn't care about a dusty house full of ghosts." I was grieving, I shot back. "And you emailed me 2 years ago that you had no interest in the trust," he added. "Should I pull up the screenshot?" "I was thanking you for managing it, not surrendering my rights." He smiled, turning to the others. "Look, no one wants drama. That's why we're doing this by vote. Clean, fair, democratic. Everyone with a stake gets a say." I stared in disbelief. "You're putting my inheritance up for a vote." "It's about clarity," he said. "So, you're not lingering in legal limbo." Patricia raised her hand. "Can we just get to it?" Nathan passed around slips of paper and pens like a teacher in a classroom. "If you believe Rachel should be removed from the current trust and all legal access to family property revoked, write yes. If you believe she should remain included, write no." Simple. I watched in horror as hands moved pens without hesitation. A few cousins looked sheepish but still wrote. When the papers were folded and dropped into a bowl, Nathan handed it to Emily, my cousin, my friend since kindergarten. The girl who once split popsicles with me under this very table. She avoided my gaze as she stood. 1 yes, she read. 2 yes. 3 yes. My fingers dug into the table's underside. 4 yes. By the 5th yes, I'd stopped breathing. Then she hesitated. 11 yes. And finally 12 yes. Nathan clapped his hands once lightly. "Well, that settled." All eyes turned to me. Emily placed the bowl down and finally looked up. Her eyes were damp, but she didn't say a word. I stepped back, my voice low. "You all think this makes it legal? That a room full of cowardly signatures overrides the law?" Nathan shrugged. "We're just giving the lawyers a consensus. You're welcome to contest it if you want to spend the next 5 years in court." He smiled wider, "But I'm guessing you don't have the resources for that anymore." I wanted to scream, too. Grab the bowl and throw it across the room, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at each face in turn, the ones who used to love me, the ones who now watched like I was a stranger who'd wandered into their ceremony. Then I turned to Emily and her eyes told me everything. Guilt, shame, regret. But still, she'd voted yes. The sun was setting by the time I made it back to my car. The sky bled orange behind the lake house windows, glowing like the place was on fire. Maybe it was, maybe it had been for years, and I just never noticed how hot the walls had become. I was halfway down the gravel driveway when I heard the footsteps. Rachel. Wait. I turned. Emily was jogging after me barefoot, clutching something in her hand. Her cheeks were red, her eyes rimmed with tears. I need to talk to you, she said breathlessly. I said, nothing. Just opened my car door. She stepped in front of it. Please, just 2 minutes. I exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. 2. She held up her phone. I recorded something. I wasn't going to show you. I didn't even know if it mattered. I stared at her unblinking. She tapped her screen and hit play. Nathan's voice filled the air, unmistakable and cocky. Rachel's going to snap. That's what she does. Cry, scream, blame everyone. Then she'll disappear like she always does. Give it a week and we can file the final paperwork. This house will be clean. Then laughter, then silence. My stomach turned. When was this? I asked, my voice. Last Thursday, Emily whispered. He was drinking with Uncle Rob. I was upstairs. I had this feeling. I swallowed hard. You voted yes. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I panicked. Everyone was staring. I thought if I didn't go along, they'd turn on me too. They already have, I said flatly. Emily looked down. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing now, but I am. I took the phone from her, forwarded the recording to myself. My fingers didn't shake. Not this time. Thanks, I said. She looked up, eyes hopeful. Does this mean you'll let me help? I want to make it right. I handed her the phone back. No. Her face crumbled. Rachel, I appreciate the truth, but I held up my own phone. This is my weapon now, and I fight alone. Emily nodded slowly, pressing her lips together. She stepped back, her posture shrinking. There's something else, she said. Nathan, he's not stopping with you. What do you mean? He's already talking to the lawyers about transferring the deed to Mom's house, she said. He says she's getting forgetful. Wants to put it in his name before she makes a mistake. I felt my chest tighten. He's going to take everything, I whispered. Emily wiped her face. He already has. I looked toward the lake house, now dimmed and cold behind the trees. The wind shifted, blowing the scent of pine and burnt wood toward us. I don't care about the house anymore, I said. But I'm not letting him rewrite history. Emily nodded. I'll stay out of your way. I opened the car door. Good. As I drove off, the road dipped into a valley before curving toward the highway. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Emily was still standing there, small and still, like she wasn't sure where she belonged anymore. She wasn't alone. I knew that feeling, but I'd lived in it too long. Now it was Nathan's turn to feel what it meant to be cut out permanently. The next morning, I made a call I should have made weeks ago. His name was Simon Grant, a legal investigator with a background in forensic accounting and document fraud. I'd met him 3 years earlier during a community fundraiser, where he spoke about elder abuse and inheritance tampering. At the time, I never imagined I'd need someone like him. Now he was my only shot. We met in a quiet coffee shop 2 towns over, far enough from the whispers of my family. Simon was in his early 50s, lean with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. Nathan, the missing money, the forged will, the vote. When I finished, he leaned back and crossed his arms. You brought the original documents? He asked. I nodded and slid the envelope across the table. He opened it and whistled softly. Your father's handwriting, margin notes, even a personal designation for your daughter. This isn't just a will. It's a roadmap. And this, he held up the forged version, is garbage. Professional looking, sure, but fake. The ink pressure's too uniform. The signature's off by half a stroke. My heart pounded. Can we prove it? He smiled. We will. Over the next week, Simon went to work. He subpoenaed my financial records, traced the digital footprints left behind each transaction, and dug into the metadata of the will files Nathan had submitted to the lawyer. What he found was worse than I imagined. The $850,000 withdrawal hadn't been a single sweep. It was a series of strategic transfers. Over a 36-hour window. Each one came from a device registered to a home IP address tied to my mother's network. The login were authenticated using backup codes sent to a secondary email, an email I'd never created. Simon traced the recovery address back to a Gmail account registered under RM Health Proxy 2021. It hit me like a slap. That's what I used when I was in the hospital. I said. That was my medical proxy when Sophie was born. Nathan helped me set it up so the pediatrician could share information. Simon nodded grimly. He cloned your access. And he used your medical information to answer security questions, birthplaces, maiden names. The works. My stomach churned. He didn't just rob you, Simon continued. He built a digital version of you. One that was compliant. One that did what he wanted. It was like learning I'd been replaced. Simon pulled out a file from his satchel. Here's what we're going to do. First, we freeze every account tied to your social security number. Then, we file a complaint with the state bar against the attorney who processed the forged will. And after that, we go to court. I hesitated. I don't have that kind of money, Simon. I work on contingency for cases like this, he said. You win, I get paid. You lose, we both walk away bruised, but we won't lose. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Simon studied me for a moment. You know, it's not just about the house or the money. He erased you from your family's legacy. That's daily, verified documents met with estate attorneys who now spoke to me with sharp precision and quiet respect. They no longer asked if I was sure about what I knew. They'd heard the recordings, seen the files, and the banks had begun to cooperate. Bit by bit, my stolen funds trickled back. Not all. Some were gone for good, but enough to cover Sophie's future, enough to breathe again. The lake house, too, was being transferred. The judge ordered Nathan's name removed from the deed. I had officially reclaimed my father's legacy. I walked through every room, one by one, documenting what needed repair. A broken hinge in the sunroom, a cracked window. In the pantry, a loose banister Dad used to threaten to fix and never did. I didn't cry as I moved through the space. I didn't need to. One morning, while sorting through old boxes in the study, I found an envelope on the desk, my name, Mom's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Rachel, if you're reading this, I imagine things are already broken beyond repair. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I forfeited that right when I stayed silent, when I let fear choose for me. I was afraid of losing Nathan. Afraid of fighting again. After your father passed. Afraid that if I stood up, everything would fall apart faster. But I know now my silence did more damage than Nathan ever could. I'm sorry for not being stronger, for not protecting you, for not speaking when I should have. Your father would have sided with you. I think you know that. I hope one day you'll let yourself heal, even if I'm not part of that healing. Mom, I read it 3 times, then folded it slowly, carefully. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it away. I just placed it back into the envelope and tucked it in the drawer beside Dad's watch. The one Nathan had worn like a trophy now, safely returned to its rightful place. The apology came too late to fix anything between us. But it didn't need